back to the Exceptional Conservative Show live from the nation's capital. I'm yours truly, the exceptional one, Ken McClinton. Tonight, I am graced this particular evening with a very tremendous woman, none other than Julia Maki Pyrah. She is the author of Guardian Stories of the 2020 Civil Unrest in Washington, D.C. You can find her on Twitter, Facebook at Tactical, 16, Tactical 16. I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight, Julie, because you have done so much of good in our community, our neighborhoods, and our country by serving in the U.S. Navy and also in the National Guard. I want to ask you because a lot of people would do their first tier 4 years and say, "Hey, I'm done. Let me go on about my life." What made you stay in the military? What made you choose the military in the first place?
Well, initially, I think I just wanted to get out of my small town and see the world. So I joined the Navy. I wanted to fly. And my parents definitely always raised us with a very strong sense of patriotism. So I think that was a very important part of it as well. And actually, so I did my 5-year tour in the Navy. And after I got out, or after I completed that, I got out, had a family, 3 kids. And then I had a 15-year break in service before
Wow.
I decided to rejoin the National Guard just a few years ago, 3 years ago, because I missed it. I missed serving. I missed being a part of that. So, and it's a completely unconventional thing to do for an old lady like myself, an old
Oh,
mom.
please.
But
But gosh, a 15-year break, you go back into the National Guard. Was there any sense of change between the time period that you served with the Navy and then with the National Guard? Was there anything different, or did you just feel like you got into that old glove and it just fit perfectly?
there were so many things that were different. And I don't know if it was just a Navy Air Force thing or if it was a completely different generation. But yes, there were a multitude of differences. Um, Especially when I went into the Navy, I went into combat air crew, which
Yes.
was a new rate to women at that time. So the difference with women in the Navy back then versus women in the military now is just so different, and it's not even a thing. It's not even a second thought anymore, which is really great. I'm really proud of the girls that are coming in now and where they're at with everything. It's a good.
Wow. You served in the Navy, 15-year break. You go into the National Guard, and one night there is word that there is civil unrest in the nation's capital. Had you ever heard of there being civil unrest to the magnitude which was being spoken to you all in the National Guard in the District of Columbia?
So I hadn't experienced anything like that during my time in the National Guard. And thinking back, I can't think of a time where the DC Guard was involved during to my knowledge. Obviously, we've gone through this type of turmoil and events in the news that have caused a bunch of unrest
Yes.
throughout history. But it was definitely new to me, new to our squadron, that everyone that's currently there right now, as well as we joined to, well, I should say I joined to work out on the airfield to help out with the natural disaster, different
Yeah.
things like that. I wasn't quite expecting to be on the streets of DC, um, working with the FBI and the SORT team and great group of people, all of them. But
It,
it was definitely different, unexpected.
different in this sense because I want Americans to know that we have been berated in the media and amongst community activist groups to refer to individuals that you faced as peaceful protesters. I want to know from you, as a brilliant woman that you are, how would you define peaceful protester?
Well, So I have to say on that note, there were the peaceful protesters there. There were the people that we were there to support their, First Amendment right. They were there to make a difference, to have their voice being heard.
Yes.
That being said, there were also the ones that were not so peaceful. There were the rioting. There was the ones that were destroying the monuments and the properties and stuff like that. So um, there there was a vast difference between the two, the rioters and protesters, um, and so it was definitely conflicting because I mean we as the National Guard unit, this is our city, and
Yes.
we support, many people support what is happening as far as the movement for equality. We believe in that. So there were definitely conflicting thoughts along the way. And we just wanted everybody to know that we're here to help. We're here to protect from the ugliness that was out there on the streets as well.
And one of the things that you mentioned there is that even amongst the National Guard, there is a division of thought on the movement itself and racial diversity, things of that particular nature. But you're not allowed to publicly display that. Am I correct?
Right, definitely not in uniform, and you have to be very cautious how you would go about any of that. I mean, they assured us, our commanders and stuff, that we have the right uh, to have our feelings about how we feel and to support. However, we have to be very cautious what we do while we're in uniform, or just even when we're not in uniform, how we represent ourselves.
Exactly. Now, you receive notification that you have to get into the streets. What was the first thing that you noticed when you entered the streets? The first journey stories that you have when you enter the streets?
I think I I think my biggest thing was, as I had mentioned before, was the surprise. Um, I We received the call. We were watching the news. We kind of expected things. We were getting ready to go up there when needed. And then as we got the call, we had to go up there, prepped all of our gear, had a real quick brief training, and then we're put out on the streets basically. As we were walking along, I we had to walk from one checkpoint to the other, and I was, smiling at people, or as I passed them, um, expecting them to smile back and think, "Oh, cool, the National Guard's here. We're going to be safe." And then all of a sudden, the people that were very unhappy would would start shouting some not so nice things,
Yeah.
and that was just I was just taken aback. I was like, "Oh my gosh, when did this happen? What How are we associated as the enemy right now?" It was just a mind trip initially until I got used to it, I guess.
Now, when you were walking through the streets, did you notice that it was only a particular type of individual, maybe someone that was dressed in black garb or um, showed signs or tendency to be vitriolic and violent? Or was it across the board that you noticed that there was a sense of animosity towards uniforms, period?
So it's hard to put a label on that. And I did write about this in my book,
Yes.
that it wasn't, when I saw people coming, I almost, after a while, knew how they would react to me or to us on the streets, whether we would be met with, you know, be safe tonight, thank you for being here, or if we were going to be met with other not so nice words, and why are you here kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a particular color, background, anything like that
Yeah.
specifically. It was more an energy. You saw how people carried themselves, how they walked down the street, and they were either kind of walking like nothing's gonna stop them. They
Yeah.
owned this. They were gonna take and do whatever they wanted. Those were the aggressive energy. or the ones that were there, just kind of peacefully calm, coming at you and smiling. You just kind of, you knew what you were going to be met with by the way they were coming at you half the time. Well, I should say 90% of the time.
When you served on the streets, were you there on the night that followed the burning of the church, St. John's, the burning of the park, uh, and the actual demolition of office buildings and things of that particular nature along 16th Street?
I wasn't there on that really ugly night. I know
Yeah,
Friday night and Saturday night were really probably the worst ones.
yeah,
I had a lot of friends that were there at that time. When I say that, it was like the last Friday and Saturday of May and the beginning
yes,
of June. Um, and so that Sunday night was when I was called up, when the vast majority of us were called up because they realized security forces weren't enough. The Secret Service wasn't enough. They needed all hands on deck. They needed everybody out there. So my first duty, which actually, so I did training on Sunday night, and then my
yeah.
first duty was monument guard on Monday night. I ended up initially starting at the Washington Monument, and we were guarding that, and then we moved on, my small group, to the MLK Monument, and we were ironically guarding the MLK Monument the into the wee hours of the morning that night. Um, and but at the same time, there were other units that we were all doing a multitude of different missions. I know the Utah National Guard that night had, or well, I should say, in the wee hours of the morning of Sunday, they were cleaning up all the graffiti off of the monuments. Um, so everybody had different missions, and it just depending on what the day was. And I kind of broke my book down like that because it was
Yes.
the easiest way to explain, because the mission was different each day. So I wrote it
It,
based on each day chronologically.
was it a sense? Did you feel kind of a gnawing at your heart that they were destroying patriotic, symbolic founding fathers statues and other memorabilia of the past to get their point across? How were your thoughts regarding that?
I mean, yeah, definitely. That was very hard. I mean, I have relatives that served in World War II, and you know, Vietnam, and all. To have those monuments disrespected was really, um, it's kind of personal in a sense. And then it just kind of blew my mind that they would destroy or attempt to the Lincoln Monument, the Lincoln Memorial,
Yeah.
um, of all memorials. So yeah, it was definitely. I mean, all of it was hard to witness. It was just, and you have to think too that that's what they wanted. They wanted to be heard, and this was how they got noticed. So, I mean, essentially it worked. Whatever the plan was,
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
noticed.
They were noticed indeed by the destruction that they left behind. Uh, Later on that week, towards the middle of it, we were receiving news that the mayor of the District of Columbia had decided not to foot the bill for the National Guard in their hotels. Now, this is coming on days. I mean, 16, 17, 18-hour days in which you all are guarding the most important symbols of freedom and liberty in America, that you are keeping the streets safe because the DC police couldn't do it by themselves. And literally, you all were the best and the brightest called in to make it happen. How did you feel when the mayor acted with such irreverence towards the National Guard?
So that was very challenging to take in. Um, I actually wrote about that as well, because and and it's hard to know, to decipher what is exactly true in the news and what is not, which was, part of the reason that I wrote this book, actually, I can't tell you what happened in other cities, but I can tell you what I saw in DC. And that night, that particular night, I want to say that was that Thursday night,
Yeah.
first week in June. Um, I was we had just finished up. We were in Lafayette Park doing training there, and they it must have been 1 o'clock in the morning around that time. And I was walking with my commander. We were walking across the street to the bus, and I was in casual conversation with him. How you doing, sir? He's like, oh, I'm all right. I'm good. I'm doing better than those guys. And he pointed
Yeah.
over his shoulder at all these guys that were lined up along the visitor center where we had been working. And uh, he said that they were still waiting on a hotel room, that they had lost their room for the night. They were told that they couldn't stay there for whatever technical reasons it may be. um, I mean, you hear all kinds of speculation and this and that. I don't know entirely the true story, but I know that when I left the streets at 1 o'clock in the morning, there was still National Guard out there waiting to find a room to sleep that night that had been up for at least 24 hours because they had come in from other states. So it
Exactly.
it was real. It was really crappy.
What was it like speaking to one another? Did you feel disheartened that the city in its leadership wouldn't spend a dime on you guys, but were willing to spend $36,000 to paint the street Black Lives Matter in gold? Your thoughts regarding that?
Um, that is a disheartening statement. If that, um, I guess I didn't even realize that or the price on any of that. But yeah, it's kind of disheartening, especially for the guys that were coming from out of state to be here, giving up their time. I was fortunate that it was only an hour drive home for me, so I could go home every night. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. I find it so disconcerting that politicians, rather than doing what is righteous, want to do what is right in the eyes of a certain constituency that is actually the fault of the reason why you had to be there in the first place. Destroying property, putting people's lives at risk, even burning down a church, or at least burning up a church. When you saw the President of the United States walk across Lafayette Park to stand in front of St. John's and hold a Bible, what thoughts did you have as a National Guardsman? What thoughts did you have as an American patriot?
So I didn't personally see that happen.
Yes,
Um, and again, I have to question what is true and what's not true because
yes,
I take every news story out there with a grain of salt because I saw how convoluted a lot of them were. So I don't know entirely what happened there. I did not see that. But yeah, the political war that it seemed that we were caught in was a crappy place to be. I do have to add on that note, there were some highlights as far as the one that stands out to me most. I was really, this sounds like a political plug, but it's not. But I was really impressed with Senator Lindsey Graham. He came
mm-hmm.
out to check on his troops at the armory there, and he bought us all pizza. So
Wow.
hundreds and hundreds of pizza for the entire uh, group that was there, which had to have been a couple thousand at that point. Um, so that was just really kind of a neat thing that I'm sure the news stories didn't put that in there, but I
Of course not.
was like,
Of
I'm gonna
course
go.
not.
That was really cool because he really did care about his troops. He came to check up on them, and everybody loves pizza, so just
Exactly.
winning there.
But Julie, I have to say this to you, and I'm not trying to blow up any wind up your skirt. Just want to be honest with you. Thank you. Because you all brought a peace that no one else could possibly have brought. You were persecuted in the streets, you were persecuted in the executive offices of the district building, and yet you all stood your ground and you did well, and no one was hurt, no one injured. You all carried out your functions. You all were real Americans when America needed realness, and I want to thank you personally for being that, and your fellow troops as well for being that, exactly what we needed at the time that we needed it. In writing Guardians, what is the message you want to get across to the American people regarding the use of the National Guard in civil unrest?
I think my goal with that, well, first of all, thank you for the thanks. I'm very appreciative, and this is what we're here for. This is what we're supposed to do. So it was challenging, but it was an honor to be a part of it, and to know that we were helping. So, but the Guardians, my intention behind writing that, I had mentioned before, I wanted to speak the truth about what I saw personally, um, and to give a voice to the other National Guard members that were in there, to, because I have 5 other stories from National Guardsmen that they kind of gave their clips just so the public could kind of see a little bit of everything that was going around in different parts of the city, different days. But it was, and there's good stories in there. There's bad stories, like I had mentioned before too,
Yeah.
and I have some. I always write with a little bit of humor too, because I'm a completely awkward, quirky person too that can't that thrown into these situations, they don't always go as smoothly as I would like to.
Yes.
But so that mixed in with the serious stuff, and um, yeah, just to give a voice to everybody, so everybody can hear our story, I suppose.
You know, too often men and women in blue and in uniform are not seen as men and women. They are seen as these nebulouses that come in and restore order, and like robots, they go about their lives. But you're human. You feel the pain. You feel what the protesters feel. You feel what the administration feels. You feel what the common man who is sitting in their basement wondering if anyone's going to knock on their door to try to break in the night. You feel those things, and you express that so well in terms of your book, The Guardian. It's coming out on the 4th of November. Am I correct?
The 5th, actually, for
5th.
pre-orders.
Perfect.
Yes, very cool.
And how can people actually pre-order your book?
So I have my website, juliamaki.com, or Tactical 16 has their website as well. So we'll have the links to both of those, and it will be on Amazon as well. So
I want to ask you this in closing, because you have served with great, great honor our nation, and we again thank you for that. If you're in the National Guard, it sounds as if you all will be called up again next week, probably on the 4th or the 5th, because of the encroachable response of individuals to either a victory or a loss in the presidential election. Now, this is not a question for your endorsement of which candidate. That's not a matter of whence. What is a matter of whence is, through no fault of your own, you're going to be called possibly back into Washington, D.C. to bring peace and order. What would be the statements you want to give your fellow guardsmen, and what are some of the things you want to tell the American people, both on the riot side and the peaceful side?
that's kind of a big question. um, well, I guess for the guardsmen, hang in there, we'll get through it. uh,
Well said.
um, but yeah, hopefully, let's hope that it's as peaceful as possible, because I don't think any good message is going to come out of the violence. That you, in fact, it does the opposite to the message that whomever is trying to convey. It really turns you away from that. So hopefully, I just really hope and pray that we can get through this, with minimal, damage to property, with just And maybe I'm an idealist.
Yes.
We'll prepare for the worst and hope for the best, I guess, and we'll get through it. We're strong Americans, and we'll pull together as a country somehow, one way or another.
One way or another. Guardians, ladies and gentlemen, you want to get this book. You want to get it on pre order now. These are the men and women who take on the challenges that most of us never could imagine doing ourselves. Stories of the 2020 civil unrest in Washington, D.C. Our artist for this particular evening, none other than Julia Maki Pyrah. Thank you so much for being with us, and we wish you great success with the book and also with your service to our country.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back with more of the best in urban conservative talk. I happen to be your host for this particular evening, the exceptional one, Ken McClinton, as I am for every evening that we're on the air. Coming up, ladies and gentlemen, in truth, there is a need for a third great awakening in America. Apparently, the first and the second have worn off, and there is a great writer, Marvin Brecht, Dr. Marvin Paul Brecht, who is with us tonight to talk about the need for the restoration of the United States of America as a Christian governed nation in and of itself. We want to thank y'all so much for tuning in tonight. Make certain that you go to Amazon or that you go to Tactile16 on Facebook or on Twitter and put in your requests for Guardians, stories of the 2020 civil unrest in Washington, D.C. We will be back right after this.